Akash, I have to say, this whole week I've been looking forward to talking to you. Thank you for coming on today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an absolute honor.
Well, I have to admit, when our team is bringing people onto our team, I'm presented with a name and I'm researching. I went down a rabbit hole. Your career is so vast and has so many different twists and turns. And I really want to jump into this because what it has led to is quite remarkable. So let's start from, I know that you went to you have your degree in electrical and electronic engineering from the Imperial College of London. So what to start knowing where you're at now, and everybody will learn this journey. What made you choose that?
So honestly, it's kind of, I guess it's this kind of, my childhood has been always surrounded by academia and studying. I was a bit of a, quote, a nerd, without, if I can say so myself, really always around books. So kind of growing up, math and physics were my kind of two subjects that I was just naturally quite good at. And I think it was my school and the institution I was in kind of didn't really think like entrepreneurship, business. This wasn't really the go-to course. It was really about, you're studying economics at Oxford, or you're studying engineering or law or medicine. So that was what I was trained to think was my only path. I mean, it even stemmed from I was really into art and music, and they even didn't allow me to study art at a higher level. They were like, no, you're doing further maths, not art. So I
Wow.
kind of, said, yes, go for it. And then without realizing, I was like, okay, engineering seemed like the perfect match between my math and my physics love. But it was lo and behold when I was doing it, and I'm not a quitter. I stayed till the end and I did it. But it was actually when I'm very open about it. Coming from being a kind of a straight A star student to failing a year in university was the biggest wake up call for me to be like, hang on, Cash, this is the real world. This is reality, and what leads to success in this real world is not, that exam at the end of the year and what's on a piece of paper. It's being passionate about something, enjoying it. And I think I learned that luckily from a younger age. So while I finished and graduated, I realized, no, you have to figure out what you want to do, what makes you happy. And, long story short, it was in entrepreneurship and in the beauty industry.
So that must have been an interesting conversation with your family.
You know what? It's so funny. It was, but I'm very blessed. And this is probably people don't know this about, yes, I come from quite a, my parents are from India and Africa. So my mom without Indian origins. And while they have certain kind of upbringing and sort of kind of, I guess, standards for us to hit, what they're used to, my dad has actually been in the beauty industry for 40 years.
Oh,
And the
wow.
craziest thing is, and this is also really quite I didn't mean to even follow his footsteps. He studied, funnily enough, electrical electronic engineering. And I didn't even realize till I went to university and I said, wait, you did the exact same course as me. But the sad thing is he didn't remember anything. I think he got very bad grades, and he wasn't like a father that would be like, what's the answer to this paper? He would be like, I have no idea. I don't even know what a
It's like, that
volt
didn't
is
really
or an
help me,
amp is.
Dad.
Yeah, I was like, you're actually very useless right now. But he went from engineering to beauty, and I naturally went from engineering to beauty. So because he was in that industry, that's actually why I fell into the beauty industry. Because growing up, I was always pulled into his boardrooms and sitting on the corner. And maybe at 13, 14, I didn't realize what I was listening to, but it was there. It was ingrained into me from a young age. So,
It's
yeah.
very interesting because I was looking at an interview with you where you were saying that your sister was the creative and you were more the technical, but you really do have a creative background. I mean,
Yeah,
between you did singing while you were younger. And then,
exactly.
really, in all honesty, even though social media can also be a very technical field in many ways, it is a creative, emotional, in my opinion, but creative as well. So, you started doing singing while you were in college, which started bringing your knowledge base from social media. So, because there is a journey here, because you
Yeah.
went from there to an
To
internship. So, I'd like to talk about that.
No, well, I really appreciate that, Danielle, because it's actually so true. I think just today, just to kind of touch on that, it's kind of me and my sister wear different hats. So I think as she wants to own that creative hat, I'm like, okay, you know what, I'll do the finance business side. But I actually sometimes I'm like, sometimes she introduces us and she's like, I'm the creative one. I'm like, yeah, but I'm also creative. I did art growing up. I did music growing up. I love arts and theatre. But so kind of touching on that is because I did such an analytical subject and, all about numbers, I did need that outlet. And I was always into music. From a very young age, since I was like probably 3-4 years old, I played piano for 11, 12 years. I played violin. I was in the orchestra, and music and singing was a big part of my upbringing.
That's more creative than a lot of average people, even those that are creative. Wow, that's a lot.
So it was I mean, I dedicated a lot of my life to music, and I think it was only when I was at university. I was very shy growing up, so I started coming out of my shell through busking. So I actually was going on the street busking to strangers, singing.
Busking, please explain.
So busking is like when you, maybe it's more of a British term, but it's more like when you go on the street and you sing for money, like just like people.
Wow, no way.
But it's actually like you have to have a license. I was part of an a cappella group, so we were doing it as a group of 10 students from Imperial singing a cappella, like that Pitch Perfect kind of style music. So that was definitely the entry level into my music. And then I started working solo, working with producers, working with like different producers from different kind of record labels. And at that time they were like, look, Akash, like you can be a singer, you just need to grow your social media. That's what it's all about today. It's all about Instagram followers, and the more you have, the more likely you're going to land that big record deal. So I started understanding social media from a very young age, and I started getting some covers that were getting like millions of views and getting viral.
Wow.
So because of that, I was testing ads and social media planning and community management. So it was when I actually ended up getting my first internship, as you said. I initially was at Burberry in digital marketing, and then I moved to Estée Lauder companies. But I started as a unpaid e-commerce assistant.
Wow. So with Burberry, I mean, you go from electrical and electronic engineering and then I'm going to go do an internship with Burberry. Like, what made you decide to go with that internship? Were you just like, I want to try something different?
Yeah, it was pretty much. So when I failed that year, I was fortunate enough where my coursework was pretty okay. So it was pretty good. So I just had to redo the exams. So I had a year where I didn't have to go to university. I just had to do the exams at the end. So I kind of spoke to my dad, and, as he is in the beauty industry and the fashion industry, he had a hookup in Burberry and said, look, and I'm very open about it. I was very fortunate to my dad to get me these opportunities at the time. I managed to land a 6-month internship paid at Burberry, but it was in digital marketing. And at that time, it was like, I knew that was what I liked, but it was bought media. It was like billboards and airports and stuff, not the exact passion digital, but It was still an amazing experience. And it was here where I was like going from doing transformers and coding and all that stuff in university to suddenly saying, okay, this is a lot simpler, but I'm really good at this. Like this I can excel in. Whereas at university, I felt like I was always the bottom of the class trying to catch up. So that kind of empowered me to realize, look, Akash, it's not a bad thing to accept that you're on a path that's not for you, as long as you are willing to correct it and change it. So I knew from that onwards, that point, that I think digital marketing would be my future, but I knew I wanted it to be more around that social media influence around, because that's what I was, I think, the most strong in as I was gaining my own audience. I think at that time I had nearly 150,000 followers from my music and my travel content. So I kind of said, I think I have something here.
So back in those days when you were creating that content, was that something that you felt that just organically came about, or was this something that you really had to kind of figure out, work through, and everything like that? Because it's different now. It's like back then it was a little bit different.
I think back then I would even say it's not necessarily easier, but there wasn't as much saturation. Like now,
right
now, if you say you have 100,000 followers, it's kind of like you would at least know a couple of friends who have that number. It's kind of like it's a bit not that out there. Whereas at that time, I definitely had to find my niche and be consistent with the content. So there was a little bit of data analytics and listening to my audience. What do they want? Oh, they really like it when I go to those crazy travel destinations. That's that will go viral. Or they really like those covers I was doing at home, singing acoustic songs. So I had to find what was my little thing and my niche, and that was actually, I think, very much my passion at that time. And I was actually even earning some money from it. Like I was getting paid to do posts with like big partnerships with Deliveroo. And at that time, I was really thinking, could this even be a full-time gig? Which a lot of, influencers growing up would actually ended up doing. But I thought, actually, I knew it wouldn't be long-term sustainable for me, someone who's a bit more into the business entrepreneurship side. So I said, how about channeling this knowledge and be one of the first to work for a corporate company, and twist the hat on the head and be like, actually, I can use this to help a brand grow because I've done it on my own account.
Which I think is very bold and daring, because not everybody is going to go jumping into something and saying, well, I don't necessarily have a degree in marketing, but you need to hire me. And the interesting thing is that, in all honesty, on a ground level, when companies were just really starting to explore that social media side and we're still trying to navigate, I don't know if marketing firms were as quite prepared for the blow up of social media in that regard. So you just kind of went, hey, Dior, hey, and just walked in there and convinced them to hire you.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine what that was like. You must have been terrified.
It was, actually, it was very interesting because I think it was more when I first started Estée Lauder, that was when I was really terrified, because sitting there as I was saying, an unpaid e-commerce assistant, there was like this talk about, should we start hiring social media managers within the company at that time? It was like a new thing coming out. And I actually said, look, I have, 6-7 years of experience growing my own social media. Why don't I why don't you trust me at that time at 21 to apply for the job? And I ended up actually getting the job. I was the youngest ever manager at Estée Lauder companies worldwide, which is pretty cool at that time.
Wow.
A lot of politics I realized very early on, from, the minute I signed, people saying, you should change your, your signature. I think manager is a bit unfair. And I was like, okay, I signed it in my contract, so why would that be unfair? I think, I didn't realize it takes sometimes 10 years to become a manager. And I said, but I'm a social media manager. It's a different type of manager, but it's still, I am skilled. I have many years in my field. But it was quite an interesting moment at that time, because I remember speaking to my bosses, and, they had no influencers at the time. When I say influencers, people were following, working in a corporate. So they didn't even know what to do with me. They were like, I don't even know if we allow you to post about the brands of Estée Lauder companies, because it may look like we've hired you to, have your reach, but you can't really post about competitors. So I was like, okay, this is very interesting. And I had to work with them to, what is it like to hire someone who has a bit of a following? Because that is a potential risk factor for corporations, right? If I tomorrow say something bad about the firm, that could have an implication because I have some awareness. So long story short, it was very smooth sailing. About a year I was working there as social media manager. I loved it. I loved every single person in the company. But at the same time, I actually got sort of poached by Dior, and I took a day off, and then I went to see the CEO in Paris. No intentions of moving to France, no intentions to move to Dior. And it was just an open conversation, just to be like, what do I do? He heard about me. I obviously heard about Dior, as you do. And I was like, I don't know what they were looking for, but I answered a few of his questions. I said where I think Dior could improve. And he said, okay, I want you to work for us. I don't know what division yet. I don't know what you'll do, but you need to work for us. So can you quit and come? And lo and behold, I quit, moved within a weekend, and went to Paris.
Wow. Like I said, all of these decisions and just kind of like pivoting like mad. With all the different companies and these are all beauty brands that you worked with, everything from Burberry, Estee Lauder, Dior, there is certain messaging that goes out there. And it's so interesting now to see how things have evolved and changed over the course of 10 years, really. With your experience with what they're putting out there into the world, because I do feel as though social media has a certain degree, and from everything I've heard from you on all of your platforms, a certain degree of responsibility in what they're putting out there. What is your experience, and do you feel as though you were able to make a stamp on that?
To a certain extent, yes, but eventually that led to my, quitting and starting my own company, because there is always a limit. And I think it was there's obviously a trend of why I chose Burberry, Estée, Dior is because I liked growing up this idea of luxury and a name and what looks good on my CV and experience. And there's a lot of, I have to be honest, there's a lot of people who would be the same. But it's when you work, I was at Dior for 3 years and I would never badmouth the company. It was my best company I've worked for. And they're my family. I still work with them today, on certain side projects, and I love them. But there was Emily in Paris moments. There were for sure moments where I made a lot of difference, a lot of change, but I wanted to do more. And I never was like, pay me more or give me more. I just said, let me do more. I'm willing to work until 5 a.m., but I can do more and make a difference. And especially around certain, as you said, like CSR or a bit deeper, because I didn't want to work just unconsciously thinking about the sustainability of the company and how to make the brand more diverse and universal. So I was trying to think outside my remit of even other people's divisions. What could we do together? And I think I got a little bit towards the end, like, I'm being listened, but not enough. And if they're not wanting to make the difference, I'll just create a brand that will. And it was actually during my trips to Sephora, seeing brands like Olaplex, like, You For The People, these new indie brands growing so quickly, listening again, using my data, listening to social media. They don't really want the Dior lipsticks, the Chanel Rouge, the foundation and stuff. They want these new I don't want to say meaningful in a very, crude way, but I mean like more purpose-driven, founder-led, authentic stories. And I realized maybe I've hit my mission because this is a heritage luxury maison that's way bigger than me, and I can't change it overnight with thousands of employees and savoir-faire that is already built in stone. So maybe my mission is done, but what I want to see in the world and how I want the beauty industry to evolve, I need to do something elsewhere. And that's when it's a very open discussion with myself, but it was a hard one because I had a big career path trajectory in LVMH, big offers, big, positions that I would have loved to have had, but I had to quit for my own personal well-being to, feel empowered in my own entrepreneurship and my values.
I saw somewhere you mentioned that sometimes when you're working for a company and you're not growing and you're not learning, it's almost like going back to school and redoing the same year all over again, and not really learning anything new and just repeating the same thing over. It is a philosophy in life that I embrace so much. I mean, do you feel as though that is, I mean, when I look at all the things that you have been doing, I mean, that seems like that's basically your philosophy. You learn as much as you can go.
That's exactly my motto. It's pretty much how I tell everyone on my team. I even say to anyone I meet, it's like, if you're doing the same thing year after year, even 6 months after 6 months, whatever your period is, you evaluate whatever time you need. Why would you do it? It's life is the biggest blessing where you get to learn every single day. And for me, the minute I feel stifled or someone stopping me from learning, despite my want and desire, it's my time to move on. And, at Dior specifically, I felt there was still room to grow, but I was actually getting tired of just learning digital. I felt that's still one part of a big ecosystem, but there's so much more, whether it was sustainability, whether it was manufacturing, law, supply, finance. There was so much more I wanted to learn. And there's only so much I can do in a big company as one individual and without making problems and political issues and stuff. And I said to myself, it's okay to actually, sometimes even graduate from like how we go from a bachelor's to a master's to an MBA. You can also graduate, but you can also really make another big step up in your career and a complete change in trajectory. And I think we sometimes as humans, we're kind of conditioned to think we have one path destined for us, or we can only do one thing. And it even stems from me getting so annoyed when I see occupation, they give you one space or one drop down. I'm like, but why can't we do more than one thing? So I think definitely wanting to learn more. I definitely live by that, but also wanted to experience more.
It has to be really hard. I mean, not a lot of companies give the opportunity to kind of switch from place to place and learn different aspects of a company, so this way you have more of a holistic idea. So when you and your sister started Fable and Mane, did you feel as though, oh boy, is there a learning curve? Because like you said, there's everything. There's manufacturing, there's the product development and chemistry and everything that goes along with it. And then distribution. I can't even imagine. I mean, you had the marketing down,
Yeah.
but when it comes to the rest of it, what was your, what do you tackle first?
I think it's kind of step by step, making them bite size and kind of choosing your battles one by one and making sure you're learning at each step. So I guess you could say a 3-step approach to tackling it. One was making sure I have the right mentors and guidance from people, because I was obviously new in a lot of these arenas, whether it was marketing had, as you said, had that down, but I didn't know anything about trademarks or about manufacturing. So relying on my mentors and people to guide me, and then listening and learning and asking so many questions. Like I kept on asking, like, okay, really, what is a retailer margin? And when you say take a couple of points off, what do you really mean? Like, here's $100, here's $10 cost of good. And I really went really dumbed it down to understand. And over time, I really understood that. I think the second thing as well was really making sure that I am so involved with every little thing. So every single meeting from the beginning I was in. And yes, it might have been, as a CEO at the time when we decided our roles, it might have been absurd to have me join even a small client call of a potential new like a plugin to our website. But I was joining everything, and I still do today, because I'm selfish. I want to learn every single thing about my company. And this is the time to do so, because I don't want to ever in 10 years time, someone asks me a question, I'd be like, you have to ask this person in my team. I have no idea. I want to at least, even if I'm not in the meeting, at least know how it's done. And I think the third thing for me was really just understanding that, yeah, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I really channeled my mindset to understand that I'm not going to be good at everything. I'm going to have to delegate, and I'm going to make mistakes, but learn to embrace those mistakes and at least just try everything with an open mind. And I think that's what led me to today. It's quite crazy to think, but I think I do know all the different types of avenues of how to build a brand, which 2 years ago, I would say all I knew was likes, comments, and influencers and social media, which at that time I thought I know so much, but actually there's so much more to learn.
Well, here's my question. With all the experience that you have had in social media, and obviously, we were talking about how the numbers and the metrics and everything like that, of course, they matter. But I mean, speaking from my own personal experience with working with Olaplex and watching how we had done things, there is something about that personal connection and really connecting with your audience. How do you feel? What is it that you are hoping to communicate and connect with your audience? Because I think that is a very personal and unique thing. And if you don't have a real true compass, they won't know where to go.
I couldn't agree more. I think for us, it's about, and for me specifically, it's about using the data. Number one, I'm very much a data centric person, to understand what are people wanting to see and what are people engaging with. Because, as much as I want to push a certain message, I got to also make sure I'm listening to what they will want to see. But as long as once I understood what my audience likes, making sure I always have the authenticity of why I brought something to life, why I did what I do. The founder for me is very important, to be as on it. I actually reply. I still have a community social media manager, but I actually go every single day. I reply. I even write from Akash. I see every single complaint. I see every single message, because it's like someone inviting me to, I'm like, they're invited, to my home. So I've also tried to channel social media as not just this virtual surface. It's like actually so much more multidimensional than we think, because there are people interacting, real people interacting. So that's also very important. And then also being ahead of the curve in creativity. So, we wanted to make sure we invest in things like really good, graphic design and videos and engaging content and things that can go viral, because that also is very important in what can be quite a stale, stagnant industry or very oversaturated industry. How can we cut through the noise with beauty, with our products? So it's a mixture of listening, using the data, still being true to you and your why and being unique to your reason, but also finding those cutting edge kind of techniques to stand out on a very saturated thing. Because if someone's going to follow you on social media, they're going to be very picky, and they need to really see value in why they're following you, why they're
Just
entering
because
your
it's
home.
very easy to press that unfollow button.
And that's the thing. They can, and if you're not listening, that's why I always say data is so important. If you don't see like, okay, look, I had 3,000, let's say, likes in my last 10 photos, but the last 6 photos have had 300 likes. Something is not clicking. Something's changed in your content or in something. You need to listen back and go back to what they want, because that is so important to me, is to really value them first, because they're the ones who are enjoying what we're putting out there.
But do you find that it's really hard to kind of connect between what you feel is your authentic message and who you are and what you believe in strongly and what an audience wants to feed on? Because I do find that sometimes, even with my own personal social media platforms, sometimes like I'll have something that I put out there and I just go, I'm not pleased with that. What did I do that for? And then it winds up going viral and you're like, that's not what I want to get out there. I actually will delete it just because I'll decide that I'm not happy with it. So where do you find that balance?
It's, you know, I think like it is really tough. And I think I firstly have to admit, like, being told countless times during my job at Dior and stuff that I'm the social media guru expert, I feel I'm the worst now. Like, I don't even, my Instagram has stayed stagnant. I don't get good engagement. My engagement has gone down a lot. I don't know.
I think you might have a few other things playing around in your life.
Yeah,
so let's
true.
not be too hard on ourselves.
Exactly. I can't, it's not my main focus. But at the same time, I am, it's changing a lot. I see now today, the recipe for success is having a dog in your video and doing these viral reels. That's what people are wanting to see, not necessarily me being very heart to heart talking about something about entrepreneurship. So I have to find that balance. And I was actually speaking with both on Fable Mane and both my personal Instagram with someone from my team this morning. We were brainstorming about how do we marry what I want to put out and what the world wants to see. And I think it is finding that balance. And it's not about doing one or the other. It's really about deciding that you're gonna have to maybe sacrifice a few things that you want to do, because at the end of the day, you're putting it out for people to enjoy, not just, if it was for you only, you would just have a private account just for you. So I think that's why it's important to listen, find that balance, but never sell yourself out. And that's why for me, vanity metrics, I actually hide my likes now. I just don't really want people. I don't, obviously for a brand, I'm still deciding whether I do this or not, but I think it's better that right people enjoy the right content as opposed to trying to hit 1 million people. And I think, as you said, imagine every content will go viral. Would you be happy with that content? That is one of the best things. So make sure, no matter what, everything you put out there is your version of what you want to see.
That is a very fair point, because I do think that in the long run, if you're not being true to yourself, it's very hard to upkeep that. Even as a brand, I would imagine. So exactly. with you and your sister who co-founded Fable Mane, I can only imagine how much fun. I have 10 brothers and sisters, so I don't know if I could work with any. I adore every single one of them, but I don't know if I could work with them. Like, how does that all work?
It's, it's one of those things where, me and my sister growing up, we're very close, but not as close as we are today. I never envisioned working, with her. I never envisioned, I never envisioned having my own hair brand, let alone, working with my sister. It's, the path of life takes you into very interesting places. But I do think it's about, working with family, loved ones, siblings, whatever it may be, or any business partner, can be the biggest blessing if you plan it correctly and you do it right. So for me and my sister, I had to have 2 hats on. One was we're blood. There's a sense of trust that I have with her that I will not have with anyone. And I know that. And that's actually one of the biggest driving forces of why our partnership together is so successful, because I trust her without anything, without any doubt. But the second thing is we were very smart and pragmatic from the beginning. We had a shareholders agreement. I said, you might be this, but let's say you marry someone and that person wants to take over and doesn't have the same interest.
Gosh, I never even thought of that.
Yeah, I just was very sure we had legalities, things in place, but also really clear scopes of work. And that's why, I've even said, look, okay, I'm not the creative one, even though I feel I'm a creative one. I let her say everyone she's the creative engine, and she is. And sometimes even she comes up with the formulas, the products, the names, sometimes the social media vibe, and me becoming, before was a social media guru, having her plan the whole feed, I sometimes will be like, oh, I don't like that. Again, like, I think that's her passion, not really what people want to see. But I have to say, you know what? It's her baby too. It's not just about me, and I'll let her have that.
That's got to be
And
hard
that's
because in
important.
most families, it's hard enough to establish boundaries.
Yes, it's so
and
true.
and respect them for that matter. I mean, working with a family member and you don't want to squash their creativity and what
You
they
don't.
are doing. Wow. So do you
Yeah.
find that it's reciprocal in the sense of what you do and
Definitely. I mean, to be honest, I take credit for this. Like, I'm very open to say I'm a little bit more the kind of I guess the egotistical one, the one that wants the limelight, the one, I mean, I was on social media putting myself out there, you know, that has a sense of I do like to be seen and be heard. And I think she is the most humble person I've ever met. She's the kind of person, I always say this kind of like anecdote, but like if tomorrow she had like a ticket to go into space or meet the queen, she'll be like, okay, if you want it more than me, you take it, you know? She's that
wow.
kind of person. And really down to earth, very respectful, you know, even, you know, saying to me like, you know, you be CEO, I trust you, you're good at managing teams, you know, you lead it. Even though she's the one who created the Fable Mane name and the initial products, it was her initial idea. I think I have learned to be a lot more humble around her and grow as an individual. So I'm really listening to her, and I think together we're fusing into like a beautiful one, very streamlined engine that is kind of tethered by blood, but also with respect for each other. So yeah, she's my best friend, my sister, business partner, and of course there are problems. Some days we have fights. Some
Everybody
days
has that regardless.
you know, sometimes she wants to like, oh, can I come over for a sleepover? I'm like, no, boundaries. Like, I see you every day. I need to like, you know, and we're both single. We're both very much like, you know, we need to also live our lives, not just work together and be around each other all 24/7. But I do think I couldn't imagine doing this without her. So
Well, I definitely know in the experience of being a part of building a brand, there is a very intimate relationship you have. I mean, granted, she's your sister, but just in general with the people that you work with, because it's a family. It's like you're working all towards the same goal. So I could kind of get it. And it's sometimes, yeah, you have to learn to say boundaries. Time out. Time
exactly,
out.
you have to for
so,
both sakes. Yeah.
so speaking of being in the limelight, I you are the host of Founded Beauty podcast, which I've been enjoying. I actually, funny enough, we have a couple of mutual guests, which is kind of
Yeah.
neat too.
Glow
The
Recipe, I
Glow
saw,
Recipe and also
and
Margarita.
Margarita, I saw.
Yes, such great stories. I love hearing about founders and people that are a part of growing something from the ground up. And what was your inspiration for doing this? And what are you hoping to communicate to others?
So I think for me, there was a couple of reasons. The first is, you know, I've entered from working in corporate with the shelter of these big names to being a CEO of a quite quickly, rapidly growing, you know, Sephora brand, a beauty brand in the space. I was quite, no, you know, didn't have, I had mentors, but not really necessarily people who have done this kind of stuff. There were people in big companies like L'Oreal, LVMH, and sometimes I was listening to their advice and I was like, yeah, they don't really get Sephora though. They don't really get this new D2C business and everything. So I kind of reached out to a few kind of Sephora founders. It started with the hair care brands and the next big thing with us. And I wanted to connect them all and did like these giveaways and wanted to collaborate over compete. And then I kind of over time, some reached out to me, like Sarah Lee actually from Glow Recipe reached out to me, and some other ones I reached out to. And it always was like a very organic, let's just do a Zoom coffee, you know? And hearing their stories, I think for me, I was hearing quite a few different stories, personally, just curious to learn, to grow, and to have these friends that, you know, entrepreneurial founder friends that I didn't have. And, you know, all my friends are in finance and banking. I can't talk to them about what I do. So I needed some people in the industry to understand the struggles and even just vent to. And hearing their journeys, I was like, I wish I could record this Zoom and share it with the world or share it in my Instagram. People need to hear about it. And it was actually a random idea. I had this idea of, I had this name, Founded Beauty, which I then got trademarked and stuff. And I was like, wait, this could be a really cool podcast. Let me just get a few of my friends to see if they're interested, winged it. And then actually everyone started saying yes. And then I started getting, when I released it, I started getting founders coming to me. And I was like, this is actually, not only is it one of the best like networking tools and you know, ways to make friends, but also I really believe, and you know, coming from corporate, that the founder-led or, you know, very purposeful led and conscious led beauty brands are the future. And I want their stories to be heard. And I was quite frustrated to see people like, whether it was like Nancy Twine or, you know, these big founders having like less than 10,000 followers. And I was like, why are they not having 1 million followers? Like, why are they not being seen by the world? Like, their brands are seen, but they are the driving force. They're very much into the business. And I want
Sometimes
them.
they're very private though.
But sometimes, yeah, but, and that's the thing. And sometimes I really respect that. And sometimes, you know, I even want to be that. I sometimes don't know why I'm on social media, but there are some that actually do want to be out there, and they want to, like, you know, they want to be heard, but they just don't necessarily know how out of their brands. They hide behind the brand. And I'm like, but you need to also shine, because I think it brings people closer to the brand when they get to know you and your journey, and how you're the one packing the boxes late at night at 11 p.m. for the customers, or you're the one who's sitting and traveling around the world to find the best ingredients. So I kind of wanted to share those stories, but also share the journeys where I heard people were, whether they were chemical engineers or like me, electrical engineers, or they were working in banking and finance. And I get literally hundreds of questions every week from young entrepreneurs, not entrepreneurs, young students or young kind of workers and companies that are saying, look, I don't like my job. I want to create a beauty brand. I want to create a brand, but how do I do it? And I think these stories are good ways to inspire them.
It is fascinating, the differentiation between story to story, their inspiration, what really motivates them to go through this. And I think that's the interesting thing about entrepreneurship, and particularly in a beauty brand, because it is a market that, I often say this about beauty in general. It is such a huge, huge industry, but yet it's very small. You know, it's very small. And the truth is people know different people, but until you really get bring them together and have them tell their story, it is really fascinating. It's not like always just, you know, like when you see a lot of these big industry corporations, you don't really know where it all began. And some of them began like 100 years ago, and there's almost a disconnect to what is today. So bravo. It was a really great interviews. There's a couple more I wanted to jump into, and I haven't had a chance to, the one with Drunk Elephant. And I was excited to see a lot of them. So I have another question for you, because
yes,
one of the things, and we were chatting just before we went online, some of the things that I find true beauty in, because, you know, Beauty Uncovered is really looking at the beauty of the journey. You know, it could be anything from, if you're trying to, you know, do something with your skin, your hair, your whatever, but also it's your life, it's wellness. And what I did find in everything that I researched about you, there is a certain balance in everything you do. It's not just, because you sound like a very career, you know, strategic, going for it, really direct. But when you actually dive a little deeper, you have practices that you do for self-care and to really find that balance in life. And you really encourage people to find that as well. Like being in the moment, you practice yoga, you do a lot of different things, and even charity work, and being a part of the solution to things. Tell us a little bit about where this stems from. If is it because you were always intense since you were a kid and you needed to have that grounding, or is it something that you've learned over the course of your journey?
You know, yeah, so exactly. I think it's a mixture of childhood. So being brought up in a very, I wouldn't say we're very religious and as a family, but we're very spiritual. So growing up, meditation was always around me with my grandpas and my grandparents initially, then my mum and my dad, but mainly my mum. We had like a yoga room growing up, and every Sunday at like 10 a.m. we'd have to do family yoga all together. And you know, there was a lot of, which was at that time I was like,
oh yeah, no.
I was like, no, let me sleep. But now,
see, my dad would have computer classes every single Saturday, and I used to hide under the kitchen table. So I understand.
You understand that feeling. And it's only later, like little things where they're like, growing up, I would like skip PE classes, and now I'm running every day on purpose. It's the same thing. It's like you only realize it till you get a bit older. But yoga, meditation, spirituality, all that stuff was so hand in hand for what I was surrounded by growing up. And it was only, you know, during university, definitely there was, with a lot of the stress levels I had with a lot of the exams and work, and I've always been a bit of a workaholic person. I needed to do those kind of practices, but because of time and because of maybe my lack of, I know I have discipline in certain ways, but I'm also really lazy in other ways. So I had to find ways that worked for me. So micro practices was my winning thing, which was whenever I have 5-minute moments, do a 5-minute meditation, do a 30-minute spin class. Like, don't put so much stress and I need to be at the gym every day at 6:30, or I need to be meditating for half an hour before I go to bed, because I know that's not sustainable for me. I knew as an individual, I'm too like fast thinking for that. Like, I'll be, oh, I have this idea. Let me, instead of working out, let me work on a business plan. Like, that's the kind of person I am. But I need those micro practices in my life to ground me. And I think because I was in very senior positions growing up, and picture like me at 22, 23, 24, having teams older than me, having people come to me being like, but you're not really a manager, or you're so young, I don't know why you're in this meeting, why they want you here, like really to my face, always being so ashamed of my age, being like, oh, I don't even want to say how old I am because I feel embarrassed by it, instead of being empowered by, look what I'm doing at a young age. Then feeling very lonely in those moments, to then also living in Paris alone, then now being an entrepreneur, I have a lot of friends, I have a lot of people, but I'm still very lonely half the time because I'm working alone, and I'm at home all the time until 2 3 a.m. working. And I've been single my whole life, and I'm 27 28 soon, and it's definitely, I have to be very open with myself and be like, those practices, yoga, meditation, is my me time. It will keeps me company, it keeps me happy. And I think for me, without it, I don't think I'll be where I am today, or be as motivated where I am today.
I think it's applicable, in all honesty, for everybody, especially there are still so many people that are working from home. And so many people that are kind of isolated, in all honesty, and not really having that connection, that human connection. And it's interesting because, as we withdraw from, constantly being around people and constantly being at each other's business, we either find other ways of doing it, which sometimes is social media, or we can kind of face ourselves, right? I mean, and how do you do that? I think the mindfulness that you practice is really, really awesome, and that's great. And I think that all of us, including myself, should be doing that.
But and the best thing to understand is there is no rule book. Like, I'm not one who can sit there and meditate for 10 minutes. Like, no, I have like my little hacks, like, I don't even know if I'm doing meditation. Sometimes I'm like, I think I'm meditating, I don't even know if I'm meditating. So I think to everyone like listening, it's just like, sometimes I'm sure we all have these people we follow, or influencers or friends, and like, oh, I wish I was a zen of them, I wish I could do yoga for an hour. Like, what you see in social media isn't always true. How you do it is not always one way. Just do it your pace. And that's why I would say, like, for me, like, for example, when I meditate, one of my tips is I close my eyes and I vision a tunnel, and like I literally see a tunnel, and I literally like pretend I'm driving a car into that tunnel just until the very end. I'm just like, I don't think of any thoughts. I just think of going further and further into that tunnel. 3 minutes in, I'm like, wait, I haven't thought about anything. I've just been in this tunnel. I'm like, that's a way of meditating. That's a way of me taking all these thoughts out, because I can't sit there for 3 minutes and be like, I'm thinking of nothing. I'm thinking of nothing. It doesn't work for me. I'm not really good at these calm apps and these things, because I lose focus and I get fidgety. So I think finding your ways, but as long as it's helping you, that's what matters.
It's really interesting because I do have to say, my mother actually, I don't think she realized she was teaching us how to meditate, but she was.
Yeah.
And it's so funny how we pass it on to each generation from there. But it is something that I pull back to when I try to do traditional, things that are, guided meditation, whatever. Ooh, no, I can't do it. I can't do it. My mind goes in 1,000 different places. So I think it is really a valid point that you have to find your own pace. You have to find what works for you, because in the long run, it's, when you do first start meditating, it is frustrating if it's not right for you. And
completely.
Really hard to turn everything off. And then you think, like, I'm a failure at this.
Yeah. And then you get demotivated and you don't want to do it again. But, we forget our mind. It's because it's on the internal part of our life, in our body. We don't see everyone's mind, and everyone is very different. Some people's minds are like zigzags, crazy, all my time thinking of different ideas. Some people are literally just like, well, one at a time. I can only do one thing at a time. And that is so important, to just admit that we are very different. But also, like, meditation comes in so many forms, like also like whether it's boxing or whether it's painting, or you're
You
probably
posted
doing it
recently about
without
boxing,
realizing.
didn't you?
I did, yeah. That's another thing I'm doing just for my personal well-being, but also I'm not really a violent, like I don't think boxing is violent, but I'm not really like I don't have these emotions like boxed in and stuff. So I'm not doing it to like let off steam. I'm doing it to like focus, to channel this energy of, I earn the prize, be agile, be focused. And it's really amazing how boxing can train you to just be so much more yeah, focused in life. And that's why I do it, because I think sometimes in my business and my entrepreneurship, I have so many ideas that I actually like need a sense of focus now. And it probably doesn't, like, again, I don't, that's why I don't like social media too much, because every time I see, people think what I'm doing on social media, they think it's all perfect and think, wow, you know exactly what you're doing. But I'm like, if you see the amount of ideas I start, businesses I do, and then 2 months later I stop it and I've spent this much money and I have this ideas, and I'm like, no, 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 don't do it. It's a bit of a mess, I'm
I
just
actually think generational and more people feel that way. They pick things
yeah,
up but I mean, isn't that, I mean, that's part of the joy of life, is that,
that's the
try
thing.
something out, and then if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. The
And you're
fact that
learning
you
from
can,
it all.
we're learning from it, and then taking what you got from it, take it to the next thing, but what is it? Recognizing that you need to let it go.
Exactly.
Sometimes that is one of the most powerful things you can do, is learning when you
Exactly.
got to let it go.
And sometimes
Well,
I have these ideas and I'm like, do it, knowing that I'm probably not going to continue it, but do it. So at least then I can say, I've tried it, it's done. Now let it go, as he
what
says.
is it they said? Sometimes regret is like the biggest failure, in many
It is.
ways.
Yeah, yeah,
Regret
yeah.
that you didn't even try is probably a bigger failure than trying and failing in to begin with.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, with
Couldn't
that
agree
being
more.
said, I'm going to say thank you for coming on. And I feel like what a great journey. And I'm so excited to watch you grow and your sister grow in your business. And very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.